just kidding. You can go. You can go. It's okay. Well, thanks for coming, everyone. It was a great day here at the Edge Now House of Web3. If you didn't know, me, Lynn, and team put together some pretty amazing one-on-ones, and I got to meet a bunch of really cool founders, all doing something different. And that it's just so fun to meet new builders with whether it's finding product market fit or just looking for funding. It's really cool because builders kind of create the world, right? Users only come if builders build. So thank you, Lynn. Great job coordinating everything, and appreciate you all did what you all did today. But for those I don't know yet, I'm Kyle Rojas. I oversee global business development and partnerships for EdgeNode, which is the initial team behind the Graph, which is a data protocol for the Web3 space. And I'm joined by some pretty amazing and pretty diverse folks on the panel. So Mimi from OWC, Ron from ChainML, and then Mane from SmartGate VC. And they all have such different experience, from Mimi and out of Miami, and Ron out of California and Canada, where that has a really burgeoning AI ecosystem in general, and then straddling two worlds in Eastern Europe and California. So I think we're going to hear a little bit from all of you on that. But to kick it off, maybe we just go down the line. I'll let you introduce yourselves. Mimi, we start from you and work your way down, and tell who you are, what you've done, and then where you're finding yourself now in your world.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I don't know if this is low or I'm just loud, but Mildred, everyone calls me Mimi. We are friends here, so go ahead and call me Mimi. I actually started my career in I would say like a typical product architect, worked in private equity, in San Francisco, and then dove headfirst into crypto, heavily operated in March of 2020. Really a lot of
Yeah, hi. So I'm Ron. My background, I've been entrepreneur most of my career. Sorry, talking to the mic. Okay. Can you hear me in the back? Okay, cool. So I've been working in the AI space for about 15 years. Got into it in an ad tech firm, QuantCast, building scalable lookalike models, and then started a company that was really helping enterprises build AI capabilities. Sold that to Teradata. Then went on to Google Cloud CTO office, where I was in a leadership role around applied AI, and then worked remotely for the Vector Institute, which is, as Kyle was alluding to, one of Canada's leading AI research institutes, founded by Jeff Hinton, who is considered one of the originators of modern AI techniques, deep learning. But I just got really excited, about the opportunity to marry AI and Web3, as we'll talk about here. The importance, frankly, of having more community control and moving away from an increasingly centralized AI ecosystem where a few big companies were dictating the direction that AI was going to go and how it was going to play out for us. I thought, whether you looked at things like social media, where you could see that increasingly a small number of oligarchs would define how everyone sees the information of the world with their choice of algorithm, or with assistants, where increasingly a few big companies were listening at our homes and telling us the answers to our questions with their own motivation in mind. I thought we could do better, and I was excited for the potential with Web3. So I'll tell you more about it, but we're super excited about how we're using the capabilities of AI in a decentralized way into Web3 to let people build great experiences. It's great to be here. And what a beautiful venue.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Mane from SmartGate VC. So SmartGate VC is an early stage VC fund, and I'm leading our fund's AI deals. We invest very, very early. Like, we come in before YC, before Berkeley Skydeck. We invest in the company, and usually our companies end up in these accelerators. They get funding from top tier VCs. We also do kind of technology transfer kind of job. So We work with scientists, very tech-heavy folks, and we kind of help them understand if they only have the technological solution, how it can be taken to the market, how it can be monetized. We started in 2017, and since then, for every 100K we have invested, our companies have raised $5 million plus. And yeah, personally, my background is running accelerators, working with startups, mentoring them with their US market entrance, building partnerships, and of course doing due diligence, sourcing companies. And yeah, actually now I'm here for one of I flew in yesterday. I'm here for one of our accelerators where we are kind of bringing a group of scientists to US from Eastern Europe to expose them with the market opportunities here. So my background is pretty diverse. I'm all over the place, but happy to be here now. Thank you guys for the invitation.
First, thanks for being here. And obviously, we have a mix of VCs from different parts of the world, a founder. So I'm going to want to hear your perspective on that, and then a builder's perspective, which all might be at differing points depending on where we think the market is. So we have a lot of different topics. One is just where we are in the market in general, not just AI, not just Web3, but maybe tech or even what's happening in the world right now, which is a lot of historic stuff happening across all verticals in any industry. We're going to talk about how far Web3 has come in industry, as well as AI, and how much further we still have left to build to really gain global adoption, and if and when AI will, which I think we all would agree, but I'd love to hear your different perspectives. And of course, just AI in general, what it looks like, the pros, the cons, and everything in between. So, and if we have enough time, we're going to open it up for questions from all of you. I won't let anyone out of the room until we get at least 5 questions. So start drumming them up now, and I mean that. But I will take drinks for questions instead. But let's say, just to jump right in, getting everyone's thoughts on the crypto space in general, the Web3 space, if you wouldn't mind talking about that, with everything that's happened over the past year with FTX and SBF, with 3 Hours Capital, with Terra Luna, and more. We could probably go on for another minute or so. And add icing on the cake there, we've seen 3 of the largest bank meltdowns in history as well. So it's not just tech, it's not just crypto, it's really the world that's in a really historic time in general. I'd love to hear your thoughts on where we are in the market cycle, what you think is happening in the near, mid, and long term, and then where you kind of sit in that on the operational side, day to day.
Wonderful. I'm happy to start. That was a lot that you mentioned, right? I think it's no surprise to anyone that's been in crypto. This is the first time in which we've had a macro backdrop that is definitely different than what folks have seen before. I know everyone sort of is happy to tout, I've been through 3 cycles or 4 cycles or whatever it might be, but this is the first time where we've actually had a macro backdrop that hasn't been so favorable, right? That hasn't been as frothy as before. And so I think what you're sort of seeing, and we can talk about it from macro, and we can talk about it from narrative, but just macro perspective, this is a totally different landscape, right? We've often been able to say, you can hedge against what's happening in the equities market with crypto. Well, that's not happening right now, right? Like, it's heavily correlated. So that narrative doesn't sort of hold suit. If you sort of talk about from narrative perspective, I think we've all seen that it hasn't been favorable to blockchain, right? And I think regulatory in the US, and this is a whole conversation we can get into, it's becoming clear that if we don't stand up with regulation and clear ways in which we define how to work with blockchain companies and technology, we're going to be at a losing place, right, within the US. And so there's a lot there that's making just our environment also not conducive to sort of this space. And so when you sort of put that all together, people can get really skittish, right? And they usually are when markets go down, but adding sort of all of that, the backdrop of the US, regulation, folks can feel, is crypto still alive? And it absolutely is, right? We know that there's over 400 million people holding crypto today. I think it's more than 400 a month comments in, code. So there's just so much that's still happening. I think we can get overwhelmed by the news cycle, by narratives that often just take us, or at least crypto enthusiasts for a run, right? And I think the real builders often know, like, we're just heads down, we're building. And so I think there is a lot that's new about this backdrop for a lot of builders, and that you'll have to think about thoughtfully. It doesn't just impact crypto, but the tech sector at all. I know we've sort of just like, touching on that in general, we've seen what's happened to tech stocks. Like we've seen what's happening in general. I was talking to another sort of growth stage PE investor, and it's been brutal, right? Even for them as well as, their valuations for their companies. Folks aren't wanting to take down rounds. There's a lot that everyone is trying to unravel right now, and it's not just the crypto sector. It's tech as a whole that we're sort of seeing.
Rom, what are you seeing with regards to crypto in general, and then how does that factor into AI, as there's a lot of overlap there?
Yeah, well, definitely. I think there's the great builders and great projects continue to invest and build cool tech. I think the power of blockchains, the capabilities continue to be important. Decentralization continues to be important. We definitely see, very strong focus from great projects on, how do you build products that really delight users, and how do you integrate in things like better usability. So, I think that broadly is a trend, that there's like a ton of emphasis on how do you really unlock meaningful use cases, which, frankly, during the frothy period of, DeFi summer and so on, there was a tendency to have a lot of kind of frenzy around investing and short-term profits. So I think it's good that we've moved to more of a building phase and like really establishing good technology. We think that the best companies often are the lean ones that are really focused on what do you need to do to create value, and so that's a good sign in my mind. We see that coming in the space of AI. Like obviously, all the excitement around generative AI, first with the release of things like Stable Diffusion around generating images, and then Chat GPT. Those of us who've been working in AI sort of had that excitement around. It was amazing that you could give natural language instructions to AI models, and they would do intelligent things. Back when OpenAI published a research paper on GPT-3 like 3 years ago, but everyone saw it and felt it with their own hands when they got access to Chat GPT, and that's just been this incredible boom of excitement, right? So we see that being adopted across tech innovators anywhere, and nowhere do we see it, the excitement and the focus more than in Web3 projects, where people are saying, hey, one of the big challenges in Web3 and blockchain has been usability. It's new concepts, it's unfamiliar. How do you make it easier? Well, if instead of a complex click buttons and show obscure things, you can have a conversation and ask for questions right in an app, and get some analytics around what's going on in natural language, and you can ask it to do some automation and navigate the interface. Those could be powerful things, onboarding people, right? So we see a ton of interest in integrating AI into Web3 projects. More and more we think it's part of a trend that's super important, that blockchain has a really important role in Web3, but the right level of decentralization and integration is going to require more than just blockchains. I think that the Web3 community is sort of waking up that you need a full stack, and there's a lot of things you can do and should do in a decentralized way, and AI is an obvious thing. Like there are projects that say, hey, we're going to run AI models in a smart contract on a blockchain, but those are toys that can't work at scale. The amount of data, the amount of computation makes it infeasible. But there are approaches. We've built one. We're excited by it, but we think it's going to be increasingly important. Like, how do you integrate these components together? And we think AI is incredibly exciting, right? I mean, I'd say that even with all the hype around generative AI, the fact that you've got studies showing that you can double the productivity of knowledge workers in a majority of tasks in the economy by building agents on top of generative AI, that's a big deal, right? And we think that's going to be super transformative, and a lot of good, but obviously there's a lot of disruption there as well.
And I'd love your point of view as if that resonates with you, and then if you're seeing different things from the American standpoint, the Eastern standpoint, and then if you're doing things around the world, if different people are at different parts of the build-out process, I'd love to hear your point of view on that.
Yeah, so it's very interesting. Like, I work with companies from Eastern Europe. I work with companies from US, and it's very interesting to see first how this movement of generative AI has been impacting these companies, and also how with this economic situation, the companies in Eastern Europe have some kind of benefits. So first, with all these new solutions, now the companies can actually start something with less effort because generative AI gives them the capability of optimizing a lot of things that before they would need a team of like 10, 15 people to do. Now they can do it just with a team of three. So it's kind of like usually when you have economic drop downs, what you see, a lot of noise is canceled out because, people can't afford to do startups, so to say, and only those that are very sustainable stay. But this is kind of a very interesting situation here. Uh, in Eastern Europe, founders are a step ahead because the cost of building a startup is way less there. So adding up these two, we have a very interesting scene. The startup scene is still like growing very actively. A lot of new initiatives coming up. I think this is a very interesting time to be in the VC world.
Yeah, and let's get into the venture standpoint there. I'd love to hear, Mimi, maybe we start with you on what's your thesis on AI and the overlap with Web3 technology? How are you all thinking about it? Is it a very long-term thesis or is it something you can action right away? And then maybe we go to some different perspectives across the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's always sort of hype narratives that pop out, right? I think sort of 5 years ago, we were all talking about big data. Does anyone remember when we were, big data was everything, right? And we were talking about it. And, folks, even in PE were sort of like, how do we think about database and cloud computing, big data? It's all the thing. Everybody needs to collect data. Now we're at the point where a number of institutions really took that on, right? They started understanding we need to collect data. Some of them, they didn't really know what they were collecting, how to use it. And now we're at this precipice where folks are excited about AI, right? And also about blockchain, and they're still trying to figure it out. So for us at our firm, we're super excited about blockchain. It's sort of the ethos in where we've sort of originated our thesis, but also excited about the potential of what AI can do with just this large amount of data that folks have now collected and are able to really use in a thoughtful way. So just a few things that, we're excited to sort of see within blockchain and AI. There's not only just like things like supply chain, but even DeFi, right? Like we think about just how, the way in which folks will operate or use finance with DeFi can be improved by AI as well. So really, as we continue to develop as a firm, really what we're looking for is the most disruptive technologies across sectors. And we know AI and blockchain is one of them. And really how technology will, what's sort of the short of what I can say here, how technology will really just disrupt as well as impact multi-sectors. And so blockchain and AI is core to sort of that thesis. And
I agree. Mane, what about your thesis in general? Does your firm put it into a couple of sentences, or is it a how do you all think about the AI space in general, and if you could encapsulate that in a paragraph, possibly?
It's hard to put it in a paragraph, but with one word, we invest in frontier tech solutions, where there is an IP, there is usually on the intersection of healthcare with infrastructure, SaaS, IoT, biotech. Is pretty industry agnostic, but yet we still don't invest in blockchain technologies because that's out of our expertise. Simply put, we invest in frontier tech solutions that are challenging the limits of AI, machine learning, and kind of bringing machine learning and AI into different fields to get the most out of it. Uh, yeah, that was more than a
No, that was
sentence.
actually that last paragraph was perfect. And I think it's really good to encapsulate how we think about it, and I bet we all would have put it a little bit differently. Ron, what are your thoughts about, let's say, your thesis on Web3 and AI overlap, and does your firm encapsulate that, or are you just heads down building based on who you're working with?
Yeah, no, we think the long term, there's so much synergy there that the opportunity to have decentralized AI, that you can have nonstop execution of agents that are controlled by a DAO, right? Like those kinds of capabilities are powerful. Like as you think about integrating AI capabilities in smart contracts, like real-time adjustment of protocol parameters in DeFi, adding second layer of defense with automated security to reduce fraud and risk of attack, right? Those are examples of where deeply integrating AI into smart contracts is powerful. But then more generally, what we think is decentralizing already gives you the ability to have nonstop access and portability. And there's all kinds of opportunity to have composable AI services. So if you think about it, what's one of the coolest things about smart contracts is they're composable. You can easily use one smart contract as a building block for another. And what don't you have to do? You don't have to go out to a website. You don't have to go sign in. You don't have to go create an account. You don't have to give them a credit card. You don't need to manage an API key for each one. You don't need to worry about troubleshooting, the integration token, right? Like how do you integrate these pieces together? So we think that the power of NFTs for royalties and micropayments for AI services, along with public key cryptography-based security integration, lets us provide composable AI services that are as easy to compose as it is to compose blockchains. We think the world's going to need that. We don't think people want all the friction of Web 2 ways of building and integrating AI. And for that matter, we also think, and the thing we're also working towards is, to that point around monetization, making it so that the creators who are building cool AI services can charge for it, whether it be through royalties and NFTs or simply bounties for building the best open source. Again, this is a superpower of Web3 to compensate creators and have community participation instead of having an extractive group that builds a marketplace and harvests all the value, right? So we think that there's a number of dimensions where there's so much synergy between Web3 and AI. And of course, people building great Web3 experiences and products are able to use AI, whether it be in conversational interfaces or to add more intelligence. Like the term smart contract is great marketing, but what you can actually do on chain isn't really smart, not by comparison with AI, right? So being able to call out to AI superpowers in smart contracts can help you a lot in terms of automating things that would be really hard to do with the simple scripting that you can do on chain. So we think there's so much potential and synergy here. So yeah, that would be kind of a quick summary. And we're really looking to make it easy for people to build great generative AI applications for Web3, and then have an infrastructure protocol that will be decentralized and controlled by the community. Because Web3 is so great at creating self-sustaining ecosystems of open source.
And I just wanted to add something. I think for folks who may not be as technical or in depth in just crypto in general, I think, as we get to our next we talk about Web3 often, kind of we're already there, but most folks would sort of say we're maybe in a 2.5 version of it. Our next experience of the internet, everything is about data, right? And so I come back to this topic of when we were excited about big data, et cetera, but how do we start to leverage that data? How do we start to make it more transparent, right? And so conversations and topics about what we're having right now, blockchain being able to be secure and transparent and allow for that flow or just easy rails of payment and micro payment of data or exchange, and AI allowing for us to leverage that data to make actions on it is really where the conversion starts. It's where the conversation starts for our next experience for the internet, right? So I think a lot of us are always talking about sort of the Web3 experience, and these are two core technologies that will be pivotal to it. We're all living our experience on the internet, and data is a huge part of it. So how do we manage it? How do we make it transparent? How do we allow it to adapt and learn and do things for us that might be convenient? How are we maybe actually giving it too much power and creating biases, right? And this is the conversation we're having here, right? So I think it's an evolving one, and it's one that hopefully everyone in this room is excited about as well.
And I think you mentioned a good point that biases play a huge role into tech in general. I think anyone can agree with that. And Ron, maybe we start with you, then go to Mane next. How do biases play into AI, and at what point do they become their own creature with the amount of data that they can kind of learn from their own or on their own as they accumulate more from the internet? How do biases play, in your opinion, in the role of AI in general?
Yeah, it's an area that there's been a lot of attention, rightly, in the last few years. That now, conferences on fairness, accountability, and transparency in AI, and rightly so, because there's a number of ways that you can end up with biased technology, right? It can come from the you're learning from data that's captured from human processes, right? So if you have discrimination by people, then the data will reflect those discriminatory decisions. Like a classic example of that was when Amazon was trying to use AI to automate hiring, and then they noticed that the keyword screener in the resume using that AI, it would say, oh, it says women's soccer team. That's not a good fit. It was learning awful things like, well, women aren't well qualified for these roles because it had learned bias, gender bias in this case, from their past hiring decisions. And they found it hard to fix, right? They end up scrapping the system. Another one that's even a little bit more insidious, it may not just be, data on decisions, but there was another interesting case where you had a medical system that was predicting, risk of somebody, needing treatment, like who needs treatment. But in this case, the system was trained on, what is the likelihood of spending on a condition. And so it discriminated against people of color because, they were getting less treated. And so it said, oh, their conditions are less serious because they're less likely to show up as treatment. So a different kind of bias, right? So there's a lot of different ways that you can have bias in the systems. Now there's things, some of that, I mean, you can kind of look at it. Those are obviously, employment and health are super high stakes. There's a range of areas, right? And the other one that comes up a lot with generative AI can also be, toxic or offensive language, right? And, it unfortunately isn't that hard taking, pick your favorite chat bot and try to provoke it into saying some stereotypes. And, there's some filters, but if you play with it a little bit, you can usually get it to cough up something noxious because, it's been trained on a lot of internet data and it's learned a lot of bad things, right? So classically, there's a lot of negative sentiment around, sort of classically victimized minorities. So these are all serious concerns, and I think it's important that you, when you're using and training AI models, that you document them, right? So like a big thing is having data sheets and being clear on uses and assessing for bias. So that's an important topic.
Mane, how are you thinking about that from an investor standpoint, and how does it play into your thinking, or is it more trusting the builders and investing in the right team? How do you all think about that as a firm?
Yeah, I don't think VC can take on all the responsibility of like investing in the right companies, right founders, but we do our best. We usually only invest in founders with whom we have overlapping values. Even if we see the next founder of the next Thesis, but we don't believe in their values, we won't invest in the company. So that comes first for us. But with all that being said, I think that's an issue that most of the companies are going to have in the future. But also, how I think it's being solved is the rise of a small category of other companies that are going to tackle that issue. For example, we have one in our portfolio already. It's called Manos, and it's identifying the failures of AI models in real life deployment. So it's yeah, just the tip of the iceberg. But I think over time that issue is going to be tackled, and with enough resources put, we're kind of gonna get closer to having models that can actually operate in the real world, and we can decrease bias.
Yeah, I mean, AI can help there, right?
Yeah.
And maybe smart contracts are not immune to bias. Are your any thoughts on that and how it overlaps?
Yeah, I would just add, I think Mane said it well, is that the VC can't bear all of what technology might do, but we do have a duty to help our portfolio companies think through their impact with what they build. And so I think that, going alongside that, technology isn't bad, it's how humans use it, right? We can make things bad or good, but as a portfolio company, we always want to make sure we're supporting people and thinking about the most pertinent ways in which technology can be used ineffectively or how the company is being seen, image, etc. And so we always just want to, go alongside thinking about how do we improve overall good of, technology and the team and what's happening. And so yeah, it's a difficult place to be at when you talk about biases within technology. And really it's on the team as well to improve data sets. Like we talk, it really starts at data sets, right? As well. And so when you sort of see those things or those highlights come known to the team and the investors, it's where we want to have an active discussion about, hey, how can we improve this? What are technologies or ways in which we can ensure the data set and the models running, et cetera, right? So you're absolutely right on that point as well. I know Ron has something else to say.
No, I mean we could talk a long time. Those are great points.
We should do it over drinks after the event.
Absolutely.
I think that's a good segue into the converse side of AI and the pros and cons it can add to the world. So most notable, or many notable names in tech and academia. We were talking about Jeff Hinton and how he just quit Google in a very public way, and he was seen as kind of one of the founders of AI tech in general after bringing attention to the dangers of the technology. Mane, I'd love to hear your view first. What are your thoughts on that thought experiment of how dangerous AI could be for the world? Do the pros outweigh the cons? And what are the kind of cons you see realistically, apart from people that might get a little bit fantastic and fear mongering around the world?
Yeah. I think privacy issues are one of the most severe ones at the moment, and yeah, there is a lot of room for a lot of room to be careful here and to take necessary measures against that, like privacy issues, one, um, IP issues again, and yeah, but I don't know why. Maybe I'm just optimistic, or I don't see this getting out of control because there are so many cons that I think with the correct regulatory measures and correct collaboration among the creators of these models, the regulators, and other players of the ecosystem. AI has the real potential of transforming the world in a way that it can make the world a better place for humanity. Uh, yeah, at the moment, I'm not sure why we are not very worried about that. We feel like AI is still at the very, very, very beginning of its capabilities. But yeah, we need to, the necessary regulatory bodies need to take the necessary measures now to get prepared for the scary future. No, continue.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree that you want to have regulation around as you have more and more powerful and capable technology to make sure that it's being developed in a responsible way with appropriate analysis of what are new capabilities and ensuring that you really have clarity around what might be the risks, right? I mean, as you get more and more powerful AI, it can be literally used in weapons, and it can be used for all kinds of purposes that may be problematic. And I think we can solve over the next few years into next decade. AI could help us solve all kinds of really hard problems. Like it could make major impact on climate change, and it can do a lot to help us with things like longevity and minimizing all the suffering that's coming from people aging and suffering diseases. Like there's so many amazing applications where AI can be a transformative good, but with that power comes great responsibility, right? So I think it's important to have to assess it and develop the wisdom and understand. Like one of the things is we don't right now have a very good model of, as we keep doing research and build new capabilities, what will happen? Like, what will AI be able to do next? And so without that ability to predict, we need to have some, the way we need to build it is with a certain level of study and care rather than sort of quickly in a race to get it out to the market as fast as possible without testing in an appropriate third party view. I mean, I think actually it would be a wonderful future if we had DAO governance and we had multi-stakeholder input on the development of the best research. And I think it would be wonderful if the government would not just try to regulate but really fund these areas. Like, how do we have more understanding of capabilities and invest in AI that can solve some of the grand societal challenges. So it would also be nice if we as a society put more effort onto these areas. So I think there's a exciting opportunity and path forward, but I think it's an area that we have to make the investments to build for the right future that we want. It's a time we really need to, as citizens, as well as influencers who are working in a technology field, ensure that we're going in a good direction and try to influence that.
Amy, any thoughts?
I'll just add to this one. Tell me about an emerging tech that hasn't had some sort of con or fear around it, right? You can't think of one, right? And so I think, like my panelists said, regulations, standards, they're all going to be really important, and having the folks who are building alongside the folks who are going to either be making laws, policies, etc., alongside for that discussion is super important, right? I think we could go on and on about how the future might be scary with AI, right? Where we'll never know if content is real, and there'll be so many. We could go on and on, right, about it. But I really do think, alongside builders and regulators and just creating standards for the industry, or even frameworks and tools, will really come a long way. Money and both Ron have already talked about a few that have sort of addressed situations that we've talked about, whether it's bias, whether it's stepping on blockchain technology as well as capabilities as well.
I agree. You think of when people went from horses to cars or from cars to airplanes. I bet the same thing was when they went from spoken word to written word. It's just any disruption is feared, and it ends up being just a normal part of life. So I agree with that very much. Ron, one follow-up question. You mentioned on being good citizens and participating. What do you see that, like, what can we do to participate, to have a voice, to help this grow and go in the right direction?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's opportunity for us. One of the great things about Web3 is that it's about building communities and having community participation, to be transparent, to build an open source, and to do things like giving real choice around the AI that's available. I think those are all really positive ways of getting involved and acting. I mean, I think it's also good to be educated and sort of be part of using AI technology, so you're aware and can sort of contribute to the conversation about how it can be used.
Yeah, I agree with that. I always think it's funny when people try to stop a technology they've never used with no insight into it at all. So getting to use it is probably a very important aspect to it. Now, from an operational standpoint, AI or large language models in general, LLMs, use a ton of data. Is that going to be a problem, potentially even in the near future? Where are we going to store that? How are we going to store that? And I'd love to hear if any of you, Mane and Mimi, if you're thinking through or doing diligence on anything that is working on that, and then Mimi, if there's an overlap, and if Web3 can help solve that problem, or if it can only rely on Web2 technologies in general. Anyone?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll start. I'm sure you both have some insight on this one too. That one of the really powerful things that's happened with generative AI, or the underlying foundation models, is training models on a large corpus of data. They then develop a wide range of skills and knowledge. So unlike previous iterations of AI, where researchers had to build a model for each task narrowly and gather data just for that one task, we're finding that, training across not just text, but increasingly multimodal data, so images, videos, sounds, these variety of modalities, we're moving into a world where we have AI models that can do just a wide range of tasks. And so what that means is kind of interesting is, you can train these models where you have the data, but then you can deploy them, and there's still value in having data for fetching information to prompt them to assess and refine, right? So there's still some data, but these general powerful models can be used with a lot less data, right? So people took, Facebook trained this model Llama, and people were literally running kind of bootleg version of on a MacBook Pro, right? Just on a laptop, and it was running well just with the local data because it already had sort of memorized a lot from the data it was trained on, right? So you're starting to see this interesting interplay where you can do powerful things with AI without necessarily having to have had all the data. Now that's creating this whole other conversation around like data ownership, and you're seeing all kinds of organizations say, "Hey, we want to build a wall around our data so we can monetize it," right? So very sad for AI researchers. Reddit had always been an extremely popular source, a great source of data for academic research, but they decided, nope, we're removing all of it. You can't use it unless you pay us. So it's gone as a data set, right? Similarly, Yelp is like, hey, we don't want people training AI models on our data. We want to monetize it ourselves. So we're seeing, increasingly islands of data being formed as people are saying we're going to try to limit the data. And the sad thing is it's sort of a continuation of this trend of a less and less open internet, right? That, back in the early days of the internet, the idea was it was all open and you could use it for a variety of purposes, and it was about sharing, but it's being closed off, right? And so, it's worrisome if the only people that are going to be able to train these powerful AI models are the big corporations that can cut, big deals to pay for it, and nobody else has access, not the academic researchers, not the open source models. So, so I think that's a big factor in terms of the storage layer. I think decentralized storage, whether of structured data and databases or graph databases or unstructured documents, there's real progress on decentralized storage, and there's some good there's some real nice value proposition in things like IPFS and Arweave, the graph and space and time and so on, right? There's a lot of nice technologies there, so I think they will be interesting as capabilities. We haven't yet seen one kind of database that is becoming important for AI is, vector databases, which is a way of being able to take little bits of information and make them easily available for prompting AI models. We haven't seen that come out decentralized yet, but I think I believe we will see that soon. So I think the data infrastructure for Web3, even decentralized data infrastructure, is advancing rapidly. So as a capability, I think it's possible. So those are some thoughts.
Yeah, I'll just.
I got Web2. Yeah, I'd love your thoughts on. He mentioned how information gets shut down in Web2 in general, and your thoughts on Web3 and why we're really here and how that might affect us.
Absolutely. I think that was just so well said. The point that you started mentioning about the wall guardings coming back up, right? Because everyone wants to own data and everyone wants to build the best models that can service people and sort of bring the best products. And I know there's a founder out here that's actually working on this particular thing, but Web3, when we think about identity, right, and owning our data and being able to share that with companies or being able to keep it as open as we want, right? Those are core components that are going to come when we think about this larger convergence between AI and blockchain. And so it was just so well said that you sort of talked about we're building in blockchain to sort of tear down these wall gardens, but it's coming back up as everyone's excited about AI and building these models that will service and predict better. And so again, this is where we talk about the convergence is so important. How do we sort of service what's happening on the other side? And maybe we push forward conversations about identity in Web3 a little bit more and spend time thinking about how do we allow folks to collect the data and share it with folks, and whether they get paid for it or whether they can just at least say, yes, I agree to sharing that with you as well, so that that model can service me in X, Y, and Z way. I prefer convenience over privacy. This is a huge conversation we've never had. Do customers prefer convenience over privacy? Some folks would tell you yes. right? And some folks would tell you absolutely no, like we want our privacy and that's most important. And so even there's actually a third layer to this pricing as well, right? If something can be done more automated, faster, I'd rather have a cheaper price than to care about my privacy as well. So these are all dialogues and conversations we need to have as the technology comes together. And so it's just an interesting and fascinating vector to think about how consumers will prioritize, right? And the technology will ultimately help them understand that, right? So if I can own my data, get money from it, I might not care about pricing, right? Because I'm like, I own my data, I'm able to share it to you, and I earn in some way from my data, right? So pricing no longer matters to me. So then I come back to sort of convenience. All right, well, I now am able to sort of connect the two blockchain. So it's almost like we can solve the dilemma that folks are having with the vectors of pricing, convenience, and privacy through the two technologies if we were to merge them.
Yeah, I think the old adage is if you don't pay for the product, then you are the product. And it is a little scary to think that it could happen again, especially with such powerful technology. And that gets into I'd say our last topic before opening it up is ethics. You mentioned, both of you mentioned that you can't really decide what's right and wrong. And I don't think we as really humans can right now. We just don't know where this will go. Um, but where do you draw the line? What what is off limits in AI? What would you stay away from? Is it just the people, or obviously there are some ideas from the get go? If it seems like a bad idea or like an evil idea, you wouldn't go for it. But I'd love to hear the VC standpoint and then the builder standpoint as well.
So it's really, really tough if you think about it. So let's say look at face recognition technology. Is it a bad technology or a good technology? Because everything, a lot of solutions have dual use. You can use the face recognition technology to provide security to a building, and you can the same technology can be used for violating people's privacy. So it's the line here is not clear, but I think where we have the line is, let's say, very simple. We don't invest in companies in gaming, in adult entertainment, in things that we think don't serve to the general goodness. But overall, I think just engaging with people and founders that you have overlap of values, as I mentioned previously, is especially for us when we are investing very early and the only thing we do due diligence on is the founder, um, like their capability of building the solution and also how like good of a fit they are to our investment thesis, and also the potential solution opportunities in the market. We come in very early when the company is just idea stage. So you have nothing else to do due diligence on. So our job there as a VC is to just invest in founders that we trust, that we believe in, and that we see they are passionate about what they are doing, and they want to see a change in the world. I think that's the only way you have a guarantee. And again, once they build the solution, it's not a guarantee that it won't fall in the hands of someone who will use it for not the intentions you had in mind. But I think that's where the regulations come in, and with the collaboration of these two, I think we should be safe enough.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, I'll just add, and sorry, remind me the question one more time so I streamline.
The guardrails of where and when you put time and capital as a VC.
Yeah. So naturally, because we sort of focus more on infra DevOps, that's where we're going to play to where AI is in the convergence for us. But I think on a personal level, where I would feel a bit concerned, and Ron started mentioning these, when it has to come towards folks' health, right? When we're making decisions with AI around health, or things like, and you've probably heard this as one of the more extreme, scenarios that folks have talked about, but using AI to police, right? So those are areas which I wouldn't feel comfortable personally that we're sort of ready yet for, right? But in places where we can optimize in the developer experience and the consumer experience, right? I feel a bit more comfortable because we've been doing that a bit longer, right? But things around sort of health and whether it's everyday sort of, you know, interactions with policing, there's just still so much that, we need to spend time on.
Ron?
Yeah, I mean, I think any organization ought to have principles and ways of making decisions around ethical questions, right? I mean, certainly we worked on this at Vector Institute. You know, Google certainly put a lot of effort into coming up with principles and guidelines to and a process for making decisions. So I think it's important to have a framework of how you think about it. You know, when you're thinking about things like building a marketplace, I think you want to bake in transparency and visibility. So, uh, you know, like from our earliest designs, we've said, hey, we want to make sure that when people are publishing services, that they can put out model cards that describe them in a way that lets you understand like what are the capabilities and the limitations. And we want to make sure that there's choice. So with that transparency, people can choose like is this an algorithm I want to use? We want to let people have choice of different algorithms, and even let people decide like I don't want to support running that kind of application, that kind of algorithm. I'm not in my decentralized network. I don't want to run that on my servers. I don't think that's cool, right? And so make it so that people can have some visibility and choice. I think that's important. I think everyone in a decentralized network thinks about this like how do you allow freedom to run things while still respecting laws, right? Those are important questions, right? And we don't think I think there have been some people who take a very strong view of almost an anarchist view of like decentralized systems should be outside the law. I think that viewpoint has been repeatedly shown to be a doubtful one. So instead, it's on us to make sure that when we build decentralized systems, we still have ways that they can be run in a legal and compliant way wherever they're being run. So that also becomes really important. And I do think that being able to be compliant with regulations is incredibly important. That we don't want to start imposing like one of the downsides of highly centralized systems is single companies starting to make big decisions about what the world should want and do, and they're going to impose their ethics and views. Yeah, that's not a future I want to see. I don't want to see unelected mega corporations deciding our future. I think we need to do that as a democracy.
I do want time for some questions in the audience. The last thing I'll say, and it could be a little controversial, is technology has been disrupting human employment for a long time. I think AI is speeding that process up. What jobs do you think, or what jobs are really not at risk? And what does that look like in the long term? Is it a creative destruction thing, or are we all going to be sitting on our recliners drinking smoothies like in Wally?
Well, I'm really excited for this first one because I remember my days as an analyst. I think being an analyst or sort of a junior level investor will be disrupted, only because it's all about sort of data sets and sort of at the most quantitative understanding it. What will not be disrupted, and I think this is where venture is a bit interesting because it's earlier stage, it's a people connection, it's an understanding of larger trends that I don't think AI can fully get, the consumer experience or its mindset all the way, right? Like, or the way a consumer feels. So I do think like sort of venture investing, sort of more senior up investing, which takes a bit more than just quantitative. Some of that takes, living through certain cycles, understanding just customers, clients, etc. But I am super excited for the next generation of analysts because they won't have to trope through a ton of data like I did, and build models that totally make you want to end life. So probably some analysts like don't wish that on me. But yeah, I think being an analyst will probably one that in a few years from now we'll see. And we already see it. There's a ton of robo advisors, right, that can help you make trades really quickly or mirror someone's trade. So you can pick the best investor, and already today you can mirror their trades like that. So yeah.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, talking about like jobs and the change of the jobs in overall, I think it also means that there are going to be new jobs to kind of sustain this infrastructure. Also, it means that the existing jobs will have increase in productivity. So people will be able to achieve more with less work and not even less work. In the existing positions might give more output than they did previously, and also companies can run with less costs. So I think overall, all of these added together, this is not only a hazard for the in our general economy, but overall it's a big opportunity. Yeah, there are going to be needed a lot of upskilling and a lot of reprofiling in the workforce, but overall, yeah, and also technology is replacing people faster than it's opening new job opportunities for them. Like 60% of the jobs people have today did not exist in 1940. I read that statistics somewhere. So um, uh, I think overall it's a tricky time, and adding it up on the economic mm, phase we are in, it's very tricky. But overall, there are a lot of opportunities as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think great points. You know, certainly, I think people often overlook that tasks can be automated or made much more productive, but it's rare that an entire job is. So, you know, I think there's going to be you know, all kinds of new jobs. I mean, it's definitely true. Like, if, no surprise, we can't even envision what are the new jobs that are going to emerge as we start to leverage AI in ways that create abundance and value. I mean, I think it's really hard to predict, you know, what jobs won't be affected. I mean, I think there's a sense of, you know, again, in human connection. So you know, jobs like caring for people and teaching people. I think those will be jobs where there will be a strong desire to have a human connection, even if you could do a fully competent job of elderly care or teaching children with entirely with AI. I think people will want to maintain a human connection in those jobs. So I think those are jobs where you're going to have a very strong stickiness to having a human component, but can still augment with AI. You know, but it's hard to predict. I mean, you know, people have made all kinds of predictions of things that will not be done by AI. You know, it's gotten to a point now where people see, hey, it's very capable, but for the longest time, the joke was AI is anything a computer can't do yet. So, you know, we're starting to get where, hey, it's impressive enough. We're going to call it AI, even though it is something that works. But yeah, I mean, I think it's going to continue to progress. And, you know, thus far in the data, we're not seeing lots of job loss. It's also hard to measure, right? Like anecdotally, lots of people are leveraging generative AI, and jobs are changing. You know, so we're starting to see, like, there's a funny example of this. Somebody gave examples on Amazon reviews and even of an Amazon book where it said, as an AI language model, I can't. Someone had created an entire book with ChatGPT and all these reviews that were posted from, you know, written by ChatGPT. So, you know, it's creeping out there, right? So we're certainly seeing more use, but it may be hard to measure, right?
I agree. And thanks for those thoughts. I do want to open it up. I did say 5 questions originally. I'm going to do 3 because the beer and wine look really lonely, but we'll go to the back. Go ahead. And just to repeat the question for those watching online, it's where do you think data is going in general right now with the environment, with people in the Web3 space, or organizations like the Graph, or let's say technology like the Graph, Ocean, Fetch.ai. And I'll bring the microphone for the next person that has a question. That was my fault. Anybody?
I mean, so I'll certainly touch on. I think there's been a lot of experimentation around data marketplaces. I think the key thing is like, how do you bootstrap a marketplace and create that initial delightful use case that starts the ball rolling. You know that it's so I haven't yet seen. I mean, I think the graph is. I don't know if I would call it a data marketplace because I think it's providing a ton of utility for people who are building apps. So it's a little more clear where there's immediate value there than sort of the classic marketplace. But Kyle, I'll let you speak to that that aspect of the question. You're more the expert than I am. In terms of how do you integrate AI in with blockchain? We certainly think Chainlink is a good partner. They've got very capable Oracle technology and that ability to interact between a smart contract and AI computation. That's a powerful approach. Fetch AI is takes a different approach than sort of a lot of the recent progress in AI and deep learning, where they've got an agent framework that obviously they're believers in, and they've been investing in a lot. And I would say that I think that the recent progress has been in other areas, and we're more focusing on generative AI that's building on deep learning, and those types of capabilities, ultimately for building agents in a different way, have a lot of momentum and a lot of success recently.
Go ahead. Here, let me bring you the mic.
Yeah, this questions for Ron. Generative AI into blockchain applications. Can you elaborate on that a little? And we have GameFi and DeFi projects. Would we be able to use it like tomorrow with some access?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of great use cases for generative AI. If you take GameFi, for example, the excitement around how can you have non-player characters that are really engaging in dialogue and behavior, right? There was a research paper recently where they created a whole Sims world that was run by generative AI agents that were interacting, and they were gossiping and planning birthday parties, which unfortunately most of the people, while they RSVP'd, didn't show up at. It was fascinating, right? So that was recent research, and we see a lot of interest in that. Of course, like letting people use generative images and models to create their own items for NFTs in games is another really interesting use case in gaming. That's another place we think there's a ton of value. Modding, like being able to even make games so it's easier for people to build mods, with more interesting NPC behavior is another one. And in DeFi, certainly there's a lot of use cases around things like being able to make it easier for people to understand and maybe define investment strategies, and make it easier to automate protocol parameter adjustments, for things like lending, right? So, or more capable loan scoring. And we see across many verticals tons of interest in simplifying customer support, like conversational questions like, how do I use this? What does this mean? How do I get set up? How do I get started with this product? How can I navigate the interface to do useful things? How can I do end user analytics? Those are just some, but there's lots. Yeah. Yeah. So I think we're enabling a lot of those. Our real focus right now is around conversational interfaces, making it easy to build them and integrate them into dApps and processes. So that's a focus for us.
All right, two more, then we'll cut it off.
Okay, hi. I'm aiming this to whoever feels like they have the answer. There's a big issue with not knowing where content is created, and who's initiating different kinds of things. Can you speak about the pros and cons around AI around this space? Not pros and cons, but maybe the dangers and the hazards, and then perhaps blockchain and digital identity's role to actually solve that?
Yeah, I'll start. I'm sure everyone has something here. Recently I've been seeing, and it's even funny on Vogue, if you all saw the Pope generated AI photo, and everyone was trying to guess which one was real, which one was not. ended up being that he was wearing Rihanna's coat from like, last year or whatever. And, I bring this up to just say that we're in a place now where folks are literally, it's fun now as a guessing game, but we don't know whether content is original or not, right? And it's sort of a cute, fun gag to tell your friends about. But when we sort of get to influential people or people who have a lot of sway and there may be fake or generated content, it becomes an issue, right? Where people can sort of use their influence, right? I mean, I think that's one of the most wonderful parts about what we're doing right now in economy is that folks have their own community. They have their own voice. They're empowered. What happens when AI could distort their image or use their voice or to do something in which creates a deep fake? And so you're right. It's a real opportunity, but also a problem as well, right? I sort of want to say the opportunity side before I get to the problem. There's also a way in which I've seen where AI can help people create models, right? Where there are more diverse set of models that sort of appear on campaigns, et cetera, that sort of highlight if you don't have access to certain talent, et cetera. So images isn't all bad, right? When it's created by AI, I think the issue is when we can't verify it as individuals and we hold that to be truth, right? We're not looking to New York Times for our information. We're looking at Twitter, we're looking at Facebook, we're looking at LinkedIn, which we can't really guarantee where that information comes from. And so the blockchain is so essential and can be an important part to verifying and creating sort of that trail and watermark or proof to that. And so, things that we mention all the time, NFTs, we're always talking about it's just like, a collection that someone's created, but putting IP on chain as NFTs is one of the, key examples to that. So I don't know if anyone has anything else to add on that one, but it's such a great topic and we could go forever on that.
Hello. Yes. So you don't have to believe in AI doomsday scenarios to at least believe that AI will exponentially improve in capabilities in very, very short term. You all talk about regulation being the key, or at least one of the keys towards solving this issue. However, Web3 is famously unregulatable. We look at the EU now, the way they're gonna regulate it is in fact by putting restrictions on centralized entities, even though on one hand, we don't want centralized entities, but it is in fact a great way to regulate. And in addition, open source platforms like GitHub and Hugging Face will be responsible for the AI models that they host. Now, how do you reconcile that with your desire for AI in Web3, which is probably unregulatable, either of those?
I'll start. I would say I think that one that decentralized systems are being regulated more than I think people had anticipated. I think that in practice, what you're seeing is that there are points of presence in the real world where decentralized systems are operating. So there have been various efforts to regulate what's going on, and some of them have been, I think, ill-advised, right? Like arresting the developer of Tornado Cash. I don't think that an open source developer who built the mixer should be arrested because criminals ended up using the mixer he created, but it happened, right? So I don't know if I subscribe that there won't be and can't be regulation of decentralized things. But I think there's an important point, which is one, it's important if you have something decentralized, that you have the governance right? I think that it would be actually a better outcome if we were doing the most advanced research in AI that was not being done by for-profit corporations, but by DAOs that had community interest. I'd rather be in that world because I think we'd actually have, the DAOs would evolve better governance around how are we wise and thoughtful about what we're doing. But, I don't see a near-term path to that. I think we're still in a world where the thing that is most important to get right in my mind is people who are doing research on emerging capabilities. And thus far, those are the big corporations that are highly centralized.
Real quick before I pass that to you, Mane, I would like to hear how you think this will affect AI in general. How are you seeing people around the world, whether in the West Coast, Europe, or other places? How are they, and are they doing it the same, or is it everyone's totally in their own world, kind of like it is in the Web3 space?
Yeah, so I think there's not much difference here, and especially regarding your question about relying on regulatory frameworks for avoiding bigger risks here. Yeah, it's not very wise to rely on governments only because governments are famous not for not doing their job well. So in that term, I think not only VCs and not only regulatory bodies, but also just uh, the market and also the feedback coming from the market is also very kind of not very, but has some decisive role towards where the market is moving. And I think, yeah, the risks are big, but also there are a lot of companies and a lot of movements against that. And I think we can be safe for sure, but overall, I think the risks are, so to say, manageable.
I also think there's a lot of models for regulation. I think the worst regulatory model would be, hey, we should stand up a government agency that are going to take a look at everybody building AI and issue permits for what's allowed and not, right? I think, that regulation that unleashes market forces around, hey, we're going to have a way that we can monitor risks by requiring independent academics to have oversight or ability to access and see what's going on. And then we're going to require certification of things that face those risks so that there's independent oversight. Like that kind of a system, I think works way better than trying to have a government regulator that's going to try to judge what's going on. Because in that case, you can unleash the power of the market, right? You already see, companies like Parity and Armilla and Fiddler AI that are coming up with competing ways of doing monitoring and understanding impact from AI systems. We need more encouragement of that market to grow, to have innovative ways of reducing the overhead while still giving the transparency and visibility. The government can play a big role in that. They can also play a big role by thinking about liability and where when people are taking undue risks, they can be held financially accountable to provide incentives to not do those things.
Yeah, totally agree with the last point. We need more investment in the AI safety companies. However, on the first point, Web3 only makes sense if it is open source. So even if a DAO is developing an artificial intelligence agent, any incel in their mom's basement can copy paste that and do some very destructive things with it, right? So even OpenAI, who their vision was to have an open AI, went closed because they saw this is going to be a huge problem. So it doesn't seem like there is an obvious solution with or without markets, with or without governments, for there being AI in Web3 without it having some hugely destructive side effects.
I mean, I think there are certainly powerful things. Open sourcing really dangerous things is a bad idea. Like, I don't want people to open source nuclear weapons designs. So as technology gets more powerful, I think you have to have a thoughtful way of releasing and determining what's risky and what can be released. I think right now, when you see open source models that are simply implementing capabilities that have already been deployed widely commercially, there's not much risk there. But I would agree that if we really got to a world where the most leading edge research was being done in DAOs, that I think they would have to adapt from open source first to a different way of assessing risk and controlled release.
Let's get a round of applause for our panelists, everyone. Thank you to you three. I really appreciate the perspective, and you all had a different flavor to it. So I think it was a great discussion. Thanks to Mimi and Lynn for putting on an incredible day and panel. And I'll see you all at the beer and wine station.